Welcome to XYPN Radio, where your host Alan Moore brings you into a community of fee-only financial planners who want to profitably and successfully serve Gen X and Gen Y clients. If you're ready to get the knowledge you need from leaders in your field, learn from forward-thinking advisors, and take action on your own goals, XYPN Radio is the show for you. Here's your host.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of XYPN Radio. I am your host, Alan Moore, and I'm really excited and thankful that you've joined me today for a discussion with my co-founder and business partner, Michael Kitces. So in our last episode of XYPN Radio, we talked about monthly retainers and how advisors can provide financial planning services on a monthly subscription basis. Then the one thing we didn't really dig into and ended up getting a lot of questions about was the integration of investment management services into a monthly planning service platform. So in this episode, Kitces and I talk about the different ways you can help your clients with their investments, how to integrate the service into your monthly service offering, how to charge for the investment management services, and how much we actually think you should be charging for the service. As always, remember to join our VIP community at xyplanetwork.com/VIP so you too can ask questions from Michael, myself, from any guests that we've had previously, as well as our vendors, XYPN members, as well as other listeners. And so it's a really great place to come get your questions answered, and that's where we actually had some questions about this, which is where this show is coming from. Now, this month's shows are brought to you by Financial Planners Assistance, which provides compliance services to financial planners and other investment advisors since 1982. Financial Planners Assistance is a boutique consulting firm that provides the personalized compliance services that firms are looking for. You can check them out at www.financialplannersassistance.com, and you can also look for our upcoming interview with their president and senior compliance consultant, Jim Cullen. So without further ado, here is the episode with Michael and myself.
Hey, Michael, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing well, Alan. How are you?
I am good. I'm excited to host this episode because I think this is going to be a really fun topic. So for anybody that has tied in, our last episode was on monthly retainers and doing financial planning on kind of a monthly subscription basis. And we have just been overwhelmed with questions around kind of interlacing investment management with financial planning and providing both services and what all that looks like. So we're going to take today basically to kind of dig into how do you do investment management, particularly when you are already charging a financial planning fee. So Michael, what are you kind of seeing? I guess what are the questions that are coming to you whenever you're talking to folks around kind of monthly retainers and investment management, what all this looks like?
I suppose most commonly the question that I hear is something to the effect of, so if you're doing financial planning for them, does that mean you can't charge for investment management? Like if you charge them for financial planning and they pay an AUM fee, is that double dipping? Or if I'm already working with clients on an AUM basis, I'm going to get paid financial planning on a retainer fee. Does that mean I have to walk away from my AUM fees, which obviously would be a lot of friction if you were already doing AUM and you're trying to transition over to this model. So I find just a lot of these questions like, do these go together? Are they mutually exclusive? Can you overlap them? How do you overlap them? If you overlap them, how do you price them? And just all those dynamics of what does this service look like?
Definitely all things we're going to be able to get to today. So I think this is probably one of the few episodes you'll ever hear me say this, but I think before listening to this episode, it would be helpful to go back and listen to episode 23. So you can go to xyplanetwork.com/23. This will certainly be standalone, but it will probably help give you some context around what we're talking about here, because we're not going to dig back in and kind of rehash monthly retainers because we did that for over an hour on that last episode. But it might be helpful to just talk about a quick recap of where we've come from in terms of investment management, because I think we're going to be talking to two distinct groups. We've got the group that is already doing AUM, they're doing investment management, they're looking to transition to this monthly retainer, and they're sold on the concept, but they're not quite sure how to handle investments in transition. And then we have kind of the newer firms that are saying they have the luxury of starting from scratch, and they get to kind of create this and re-envision what this looks like. So I don't know, maybe it might be helpful just to kind of chat through where, I guess specifically for advisors that are already managing investments, is this really a transition that they need to make? I mean, what do you we hear death of AUM, and I'm one that's beating that drum probably louder than some, or most, I should say. But I mean, is AUM really going anywhere? Is this a transition they've got to make, or are we only talking about it because, the people that are sold on retainer-based financial planning?
Well, so obviously this is a debate we've had in I don't know how many prior episodes already, that I know you're in this camp of death of AUM, and I really don't see it that way. AUM is just a ludicrously robust model. It literally goes back hundreds of years. I'm very, very skeptical about the death of AUM because there's just a robustness to the alignment of interest, the natural way that it grows as AUM increases. To me, the real story around monthly retainers all along has been not how can we use this like new retainer model to compete for AUM clients. It's how can we use this retainer model to compete, or I should say even to serve the other roughly 85% of households that cannot be served by AUM because they either don't have enough money to fit a traditional AUM model, or their assets aren't liquid and available because it's tied up in a business or a 401k or a home or something else that's just not a liquid manageable asset. So I tend to come at the whole discussion around retainers in the first place as we're basically trying to serve non-AUM audiences, or at least I should say, we're trying to reach a clientele that wouldn't be fully served by a traditional AUM model. And because, of course, if we're going to literally talk about someone that has no assets to manage at all in any way, shape, or form, this whole discussion, like today's podcast about how do you help them with investment management, would kind of be an irrelevant point because we're sort of saying they don't have any. So really, to me, this group that we're trying to talk about, whichever advisor it is, the build from scratch or the converting from an existing AUM model, we're really ultimately talking about people who need some kind of support for investment management stuff, but don't necessarily fit a traditional AUM model. So they have, call it certainly under $100,000, maybe even up to $250,000 or $500,000. Somewhere north of that, you start hitting the radar screen of lots of firms that do AUM. So how do we fit this group? For that person that comes in and says, I'm 34 years old. I've got lots of financial planning questions. I need some help. By the way, I have an $80,000 401k that I've been meaning to roll over for a long time, and I'm trying to figure out what to do with it. Can you help me with that? ... Like that's the blank we're trying to fill in.
And historically, that potential client would have gone to an investment advisor, financial planner that only charges on an AUM basis. And you would have looked at and said $80,000, 401k rollover, 1% AUM. Great. That's going to be $800 a year. $200 a quarter. There we go. Very good point. So we're going to charge, if we're charging that quarterly, we're going to get $200 a quarter in order to provide all of these services. And so, yeah, I think it's okay to rehash a little bit. And I know this is definitely my soapbox that I get up on, but we're not talking about using financial planning for small clients in order to build big clients. This is not an asset gathering technique. This is providing financial planning to an entirely new generation, an entirely new subset of clients that have never been reached by traditional financial planning before, and how to do it profitably. And that's what we're going to be talking about. And we'll hit on some points in terms of how you can actually be profitable, serving these clients. And that's really what the monthly retainer is all about. It's how do we charge a monthly fee for comprehensive financial planning? And so we have an assumption. And the assumption is that you as the advisor want to be financial planning centric and not investment management centric. And that the core of your business and the core of your service offering is that you are providing comprehensive financial planning services. And one of those services can be investment management, which we're going to talk about today, but it is not the core offering. And historically, we have used financial planning as kind of a freebie in order to get people in for the core service offering, which was investment management. We charged an AUM fee for it. And that sounds like a small delineation, but I would say culturally speaking, a firm, if you look inside of a firm that their core service offering is investment management versus one that their core service offering is comprehensive financial planning, they almost don't even look like they're in the same profession. I mean, they are so vastly different. What they talk about, the services that they provide, how they charge, who they have working for them, totally different.
Yes, staff infrastructure service models, description on their website, how they actually deliver on it. Very true. They're very different firms. So to me, the essence of this is kind of so we're going to be a financial planning centric firm, but people show up and they have assets, and they have assets that are meaningful for them, right? So by a traditional industry, $80,000 is like, I guess, like as a charity case, I will talk to you for an hour or two. But for the 36-year-old who saved $80,000 over their working career so far, like that's awesome work, kick-ass work, and their life savings. So like
it's all they have.
It's all they have. They want help. They may need help. They desire help. And so how do we help them? And in a world where we're primarily focused on this financial planning model, so, hey, I'm going to help you comprehensively on all things financial planning. So we're going to talk about your cash flow and budgeting and your career trajectory and getting raises and side hustles. And we're going to dig into your insurance situation to make sure your college funds are in good order. And we're going to go through all these different things. And then we get to this $80,000 account for which the client says, can you help me with this? And we're trying to figure out, so how do you help that person?
And again, just to reiterate, you're charging for financial planning. You've charged some sort of upfront fee if you so choose. You're charging an ongoing monthly fee of whatever makes sense for your niche market. And again, you can go back to episode 23 to listen to our ideas a little bit on how to price it and niche markets and how your ideal client profile is going to drive your pricing structure. So you're charging for planning. Let's just say you're in the $1,000 upfront and $150 a month, and that's covering financial planning. Now what? So we have a couple of options here. So, if I'm thinking through, a client sits down with me and they say, okay, Alan, I'm going to pay you for financial planning, and I also have this $80,000 401k. One piece is, I can bring it in-house, or what I would call in-house. What would you call that, Michael?
Well, I know where you're going with this.
Okay, fair enough. So I would say in-house in terms of you go sign on with a third-party custodian, Shareholder Service Group, TD Ameritrade, Schwab, Fidelity, Trade PMR, Scottrade. Those are the 6 big ones. If you're a startup, the real friendly ones to you are going to be Shareholder Service Group. It's really the startup custodian of choice. But so you're going to go on, you're going to sign up with the third-party custodian, you're going to get a performance reporter, rebalancing software, all of that, and you're going to literally manage the client's money. This is I would say the most time intensive of all the options we're going to outline, but this is the one where you maintain all the control. And this is more, I would say, traditional, right? I mean, this is kind of where as traditional investment advisors where we've come from. So we were basically just mimicking that.
Right. So I go get a custodian relationship and I personally do investment management and particularly for smaller advisory firms that are coming into this space where you don't necessarily have a lot of staff and infrastructure support, like you are going to do investment management. So you're going to pick the stocks and the bonds and the funds. You're going to manage them and rebalance them and monitor them and do performance reporting and reviews and do download reconciliation if your software requires that. And you're going to do all of the component steps of actually doing investment management yourself.
Now, the nice thing about that is you maintain 100% control, right? You have full autonomy, assuming your clients have signed on for discretionary investment management. You have full autonomy to do whatever it is that you think is best, to select managers, to trade in and out, to move asset classes around. That is all under your control. And I think it's actually worth noting here because I get a lot of questions from folks that are coming over from the broker-dealer world that don't quite understand how we work with custodians because it's such a different world that if you're coming out of kind of the BD world. And it's actually really simple. The truth is, if you sign on with TD Ameritrade as your custodian, they actually custody all the assets. They hold all the accounts for your client, and the client signs an investment management agreement basically with TD Ameritrade that gives you as the advisor a couple of rights. And the rights are you have the right to trade on the account and you have the right to deduct fees. That's actually pretty much all you have the right to do. You can't just drain their account and run off with it, which we could talk more about what custody means and all of that probably in a future episode, talking about compliance. But basically, third-party custodian, like a TD Ameritrade, is going to hold all the funds for you, but it's going to be the client's account sitting at that custodian, which is so much simpler than than kind of the broker-dealer world and what I think a lot of folks come out of. So that's kind of what we're talking about so we're going to have that money there. You're going to go, again, you're going to sign up for a performance reporter. You're probably, some sort of client portal access, either through the custodian or a separate portal, rebalancing software, maybe use Excel, done that in the past, horribly inefficient, but it's cheaper than rebalancing software. But there's a lot of components here, and you're ultimately, again, responsible for everything. That's the name of the game. So that's kind of one option for providing investment management to your clients.
So that's one option. Option 2 is, and that should be noted, and so how that's going to process from the client's perspective is, Mr. Client, you're going to roll your assets over to an IRA with SSG or TD Ameritrade or whoever it is that you've chosen as your custodian of choice, you're going to roll your IRA over here and I am going to manage it for you. Here's my investment strategy and process. Here's how I do it. You're going to sign documents that give me discretion to trade on your behalf in that account, and I am going to manage the assets for you. So that's option one. Option two then is I'm going to outsource this as an advisor. I'm going to outsource this to a third party that does asset management, which is a broad category now that the industry is dubbed TAMP, which is short for third party asset management platform. And so this covers anything from new upstarts like Betterment Institutional, old existing players, I don't mean old in a bad way, longer term existing players, anything from SEI to AssetMark, third party companies that do investment management on behalf of other advisors. So now ultimately you're going to rely on their investment management process, their execution process. They're going to have whatever custodian they're plugged into. They're going to have, to varying degrees, their own technology that you will plug into and use as a part of the comprehensive fee that you pay for being a part of this platform. And they will do it for you on behalf of your client. And now in essence, your role is probably to take a slightly different looking fee. You're going to take a fee for essentially being the introducing partner. You're going to take a fee for the fact that you did the research and due diligence to pick this investment manager. You're going to take a fee for the fact that you're doing ongoing due diligence and review of this, as well as just continuing to be sort of the servicing partner and liaison for the client so that anything from they need to move money in and out of the account to they're going batty in a bear market and they need someone to talk to.
Yeah, and this is by far the most complex of the options that we're going to be talking about. As we have partnered with TAMPs for XY Planning Network and have gone through evaluating all the different TAMPs that are out there, many of our members have done a ton of due diligence and research. There are so many different components to working with an outsourced investment management firm. From what is their investment philosophy? So if you're a fan of DFA, funds, then going with an actively managed TAMP obviously doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
What's their asset allocation? Are they big into alternatives? Are they not? What services do they provide? So, at a basic level, pretty much all TAMPs are going to provide the trading, the rebalancing, reporting, some sort of fee billing, kind of, investment manager research, kind of those basics. But there's another layer on top of that, depending on the provider, that could involve marketing materials for you to help market this service that you're going to be providing. It could be research and research resources to use with your clients. It could be analysis of a prospective client's portfolio. So they come to you and say, here's my existing portfolio. You take that back to the TAMP, has somebody on staff that's basically analyzing that versus what you could be offering them and then providing that resource. I mean, there's webinars with industry experts, that your clients can tie into. So you're not having to host the webinars, but they are. These are all various services that different TAMPs provide. And it's really about trying to figure out who's providing the services that you really need and value for your clients.
So, all right. So I have to push back on you a little on this. And it was the comment you made at the beginning of that sort of discussion and description of TAMPs that this is the most complex option. I would really disagree with that pretty strongly. I think ultimately, frankly, the complexity option is when you literally want to do this yourself from scratch, right? Like, I have no background experience managing assets, but I'm going to take full responsibility and discretion for someone else's life savings and build a process around how I'm going to implement that so I don't F it up. And figuring out everything from all the stuff you just talked about, like, what is your investment management philosophy? What is your process? What funds are you picking? How are you implementing them? How are you trading them? How are you rebalancing them? How are you monitoring them? Are you doing effective performance reporting for them? What are you doing for all this on an ongoing basis to demonstrate your due diligence value and actually manage these assets on a discretionary basis, on an ongoing basis in your spare time while you're doing financial planning for your clients and getting your clients? So I would still make the case, frankly, that TAMP is the simpler of the two of these. Now, there's no question there's a lot of due diligence work to be done in figuring out which kind of TAMP partner do you want to work with for everything from what is their investment philosophy and process. Does it align with yours? Because you're going to be explaining, if you bring your clients and introduce your clients to that TAMP, you are going to be explaining and defending their investment results back to your clients because you made that match. Like, whether you recommend a mutual fund to your clients, you recommend a whole TAMP to your clients that you're working with, you brought that investment deal to the table. So you better be darn prepared to explain why they did what they did and why the client got the results that they got, whether it's because it was good or bad, right? A brilliant TAMP that crushes the bear market by 1,000 basis points can still lose a fifth of your client's money instead of a third of your client's money, and they're still going to freak out on you. So you still need to be really comfortable about explaining and defending and justifying what that investment management platform did. So everything from process and philosophy to just what is the actual service value they give you, right? Do you what kind of educational marketing materials do they provide? What kind of technology platform do they provide? How will you help clients move money in accounts? How much do they handle automatically? What does that technology interface look like for you? What does it look like for your clients? So absolutely, like there's a lot of vendor due diligence to be done, and I don't want to diminish that, but I still think that's less complex than building it yourself from scratch. And once you figure out your TAMP of choice, you're now outsourcing. You're done. You're an autopilot. Yes, you have to do some ongoing due diligence, but it's not the same as doing the compliance work when you're your own custodian and doing the best execution analyses, test runs to make sure that you're actually getting effective trade execution from your custodians and all the additional compliance burdens that go with being your own discretionary investment manager.
Yeah, very fair point. So when I said complex, I should have clarified that to say, or specified to say, complex in the initial decision-making process. So if you're looking to go from where you are today to basically an investment platform is in place, just going out, signing on with custodian, grabbing a performance reporter, very, very easy up front. And to your point, it gets very complex from that point on. Yes. With TAMP providers, it is very, very complex today. But once you're through that due diligence process, then it gets much, much easier going forward. And to your point, I think this is a good place to delineate, when you do it yourself, again, that agreement is between you and the client and basically a third-party custodian. There's a couple different types of TAMPs. Now, TAMPs can either be their own custodian, essentially their own broker-dealer, or they can overlay a custodian, which adds a whole other layer of complexity. So you could have a TAMP that is literally, overlaying TD Ameritrade, and TD Ameritrade is still the custodian, but the TAMP is holding the assets there. Or you could have a platform like SEI that is their own custodian. And so the money is sitting at SEI and they're managing it there. So that's kind of another layer. But in essence, what this is a three-way agreement. And that is between the client, you as the financial planner, and then the outsource provider as the investment manager. And typically, now this is not always the case, and you have to be careful here, but typically you as the advisor are going to have hire and fire rights with the investment management platform. And personally, I would say that that's a must. If I'm bringing a client to an investment manager and having them, and I'm outsourcing investment management, I better have the ability to leave them and go to a different investment manager. And again, there's a whole layer of complexity there on whether or not they can contact your clients after you leave, anything like that. But the short of it is you should, as the financial planner, you are in charge of the relationship with your client and you're outsourcing the investment management. In many ways, I look at this as similar to hiring an investment guy or gal in your back office. Now, theoretically, the TAMP should be providing a ton more than you would get from your investment person. But that's kind of the concept. And when I used to explain this to clients, I would say, look, just imagine that through this door behind me, which went into an empty room, but imagine that, through this door behind me there's an investment guy sitting back there and he's handling all the trading and the rebalancing and the research. And he's basically giving me all this information so that I can come to you and I can talk to you about your investment portfolio. But instead of literally having somebody through that door, I've hired a company that I am outsourcing it to, and they're, sitting across the country, but they're essentially providing a similar service. Because I did find that clients would wonder, well, why are you outsourcing this? And yet they wouldn't have thought twice if I'd said, I have an investment management team in-house. And so you can kind of, that's the way I always framed it for clients.
And it's worth noting, that's kind of the point of why you go down this road, right? Do you want to spend a bunch of time doing this, or do you want to hire someone to do it? And in a world where if you're just starting your practice, making your first hire a full-time CFA to run your investment portfolios is kind of expensive. Going to a TAMP where you just have to pay them basis points of variable cost is a radically more cost efficient way to do this, right? So instead of spending whatever is 100 grand or 150 grand to get a high end CFA that can build an investment process, you go to a TAMP platform and you say, how about we just make it 45 bips or 35 or 55 or whatever it is for the platform? How about we just make it 45 bips as an AUM fee, and now I don't need to do all of that work. The TAMP is doing that.
Yeah, very fair point. So this is, I guess this is kind of where we get into what are you really good at and what do you want to be doing? So if you're a new firm owner or you're looking to become a new firm owner, pretty much I would say 99% of the time, if not 100%, I'm recommending you outsource investment management. And the reason is because of these issues that we're talking about with just how complex it is and just how time consuming it is. Even if you're managing 10 accounts for just like 3 clients, the amount of time that it takes to go through and rebalance and stay on top of everything, and you're not in the accounts all that often because you don't have that many, and then remembering how to do cash disbursements and figure out how to do ACHs in, it's just so time consuming. And it takes away from you doing what you need to be doing, which is building the business and
getting clients, serving clients.
You know, and when you're starting a business, you're going to go through, I found there were 3 really complex hurdles I had to jump. One, I had to figure out how I wanted to do financial planning. I had seen, you know, my prior firms and how they did financial planning, and I had agreed with parts, I had disagreed with parts. But I had to literally design a planning process and figure out how I was going to provide financial planning. I had to figure out how to run a business. I mean, I had to figure out how to do bookkeeping and pay payroll taxes and get an EIN number and how to do business development and how to bring clients in and how to talk to clients about what I was doing. And that was huge. And that's probably the one thing we don't ever think about being all that complex. And yet when you get into it, it's incredibly challenging. That third piece is figuring out how to do investment management. And if you've never done it in a solo shop before, there is so much that goes into it, like we're talking about. And the thought of having to take all 3 of those pieces on at one time is just, it was overwhelming for me when I started my business. I immediately hired a TAMP and outsourced it, which we can talk a little bit more about and some of the mistakes that I made there. But I immediately hired a TAMP so that I could say, hey, I'm going to focus on running the business and doing financial planning, and I'm going to outsource the investment management. And truth be told, I could have outsourced the financial planning if I'd wanted, just because it is that complex. But you do have to be careful with how much money you're spending. But, you know, so you did make an interesting point where you said you're paying a percentage of variable costs, which I think is a really important distinction, because it's a lot cheaper to hire someone on a percentage of the investments that you're bringing in than it is to pay someone a salary, especially when you're smaller.
Well, when you're smaller, at some point you can grow through that, and eventually a staff member is cheaper than paying basis points. And that's the whole point when you talk about what does it mean to scale a business? That's what we're talking about, right? Like if if there's $100 million in the door, it's cheaper for me to hire a staff member than it is to do a TAMP. If I've got $1 million in the door, it's way cheaper to do the TAMP than it is to hire the staff member. And of course, the more clients you've got, eventually it's not one staff member, it's several staff members. And now you get into the whole process of, in the long run, is it cheaper for me to just outsource this than it is to keep hiring an ever-growing base of staff? But in the context of firms that are kind of smaller and getting started, there's really no question, not hiring full-time staff members is cheaper.
Absolutely. And we're going to talk a little bit, we're going to talk in more detail on how you price this to your clients later on this episode. But what are the ways that you see the TAMPs charging advisors or clients? I mean, what are the different types of fees that an advisor could expect if they were outsourcing to a TAMP?
Well, so overwhelmingly, number one is just there's going to be some base AUM fee that nominally is their investment management fee. So, think of it as if I hired a mutual fund to manage client assets, then there's going to be a mutual fund fee. And if I'm going to be working with a TAMP, there's going to be a TAMP's version of investment management fee. So that's kind of the core starting point. You're pretty much going to see that for all of them because they expect to get paid for managing assets.
So that's the main fee that's coming directly out of pocket. You'll also see, 2 different type of trading costs. Your client may be paying per trade, or they may be paying a flat basis point amount for all trades, depending on the TAMP. So you may be paying 10 basis points for unlimited trading, or 25 basis points for unlimited trading, or they may be paying, $25 per trade.
recognizing that, just worth knowing, sometimes those fees actually get wrapped in together. So you may see, hey, the total fee is 50 bips. And if you dig in, you find out, well, actually 35 of that is the investment management fee. And then 15 of it is a levelized, AUM based trading fee, so that your clients aren't getting hit by ticket charges. And whether that's a good deal or not now quickly gets into, well, so what are the size of the accounts and what are the size of the clients, right? If I'm paying 15 bips for people that are doing $2,000 trades, this is a really good deal. If I'm paying 15 bips for people that are doing $200,000 trades in a multi-million-dollar account, this doesn't look so good. And so you kind of getting back to your earlier point about just complexity / due diligence up front, getting an understanding of what are underlying trading costs. You should know that if you're going to be managing the money, right, do you absorb ticket charges or pass them through or get asset-based pricing? What does your TAMP look like as well? Do they do that or not? And what does it look like? And just does that line up with your clients? If you're working with smaller accounts in general, asset-based fees tend to look a little bit more appealing. If you're working with really large multimillionaires, asset-based fees look terrible. Just pay your darn flat ticket charge, because $8.95 on $1 million account is, barely a rounding error.
And kind of that final piece, which you're going to have with all of these options, is the actual fund expense ratios, right? So if you're using Vanguard ETFs, they're going to be a lot lower than if you're using actively managed mutual funds. And your investment, or the TAMP that you're selecting is going to have an investment philosophy that really drives those costs. So those are kind of your three layers. You have the overall custodial platform, or I should say custodial platform fee, the actual TAMP, charges that they're charging. You have the trading costs potentially, and then you have the actual investment management fees for the funds.
And then I guess it's worth noting, in the context or spirit of due diligencing these things, for some TAMPs, there may even be a separate layer of fees between the baseline just for the investment management and an additional layer if you want all of their fancy backend technology, consulting support, and the rest. So some bundle this together, some that's separate, like, oh, it's 35 bips for this, but then it's another 10 or 15 or 20 bips if you want our technology and back office outsourcing solution. And not to make it sound like it's nefarious when there's all these separate pieces. Just the whole point of it is like, okay, well, then you get to mix and match a little more. So if you come and say, look, I've actually gotten admin support that can help me with a lot of the back office stuff, I just literally don't want to do the investment management. You want someone who doesn't package in a technology back office fee because you got that stuff. You just didn't want to be doing the investment part. If you're frankly starting from scratch, you probably want to outsource almost all of that because you don't exactly have the other staff members around to help you yet. You haven't grown to that size.
So we've talked about the two options, and I do think, unfairly, we're probably talking about how complex, just all these little intricacies with the TAMP. But again, once you've done your due diligence, you've selected the right platform for you, then essentially you're outsourcing all of these tasks, which, as you can tell, both of us are leaning that direction for many firms. But there is a third option. So you can do it yourself. You can outsource to a TAMP that you ultimately oversee. The third option is essentially you just advise the client on what they should do. So this is not investment management. This would be investment advisement in many ways. And this is...
Or I guess the most basic level, like this is, giving someone a financial recommendation to go do themselves where you don't help them implement, right? Like, simplest version of investment management advice under a financial plan. Take your portfolio, put 60% in the Vanguard total market, put 40% into BND, and off you go.
Yeah, and we're starting to see more and more advisors moving this direction. So, probably 10 years ago, it was hard to find an advisor that was doing financial planning and not actually managing the investments. And now I think we're starting to see more and more firms getting started. Many of our firms inside of XY Planning Network are saying, hey, I'd rather just not touch the investments. I'm not passionate about it. I don't want to talk about it. The last thing I want to do is have my client call me when something goes on in the news. So I'd rather just advise them on what to do, but ultimately they're their own investment advisor. And this could be as simple as, giving them The Investment Answer, which is a great book. If you're looking for kind of a handy resource for clients, it could be sending them to Vanguard and just saying, hey, good luck over there. They'll get signed up, kind of do their own thing. It could actually be handing off the relationship to a company that just does investment management only. And this could be kind of a nationwide company. There are a few of these. It could be a company that is local. And I've seen financial planners partner with local investment advisors that do no planning, and the financial planner does no investment management. They end up just kind of referring business between the two, but there's no actual relationship there. There are a few ways to do this, but essentially it means you as the financial planner do not have view access or trade access or anything else to any of the accounts. You are simply telling the clients what to do.
Yeah, well, which really isn't, frankly, dissimilar to what we do in a lot of other categories of financial planning, right? Like, you need a will. I don't draft you the will. I send you to an attorney who makes a will for you. You need to get your taxes done. I'm going to give you maybe some tax guidance, but I am not your tax preparer. You're going to go hire a tax preparer. So in a similar manner, you need to get your portfolio sorted out. I am your financial planner, not your investment manager. Go hire an investment manager to do that, or I'll maybe recommend you out to someone. The same way I might recommend you to an attorney or an accountant. You play me for financial planning. I do the financial planning stuff.
And there are a lot of different reasons why somebody might not want to manage investments. One just could be fear of the unknown. I really experienced this when I started my firm, that I had never touched investments. We had always had an investment team or an investment person managing. So I didn't even know how to establish a custodial relationship. Like I didn't know how to trade, which sounds ridiculous for someone starting a financial planning firm. And yet I think we have a lot of folks in that position. So some of it could just be fear of the unknown. Some of it is philosophical. I do hear advisors that just truly and utterly believe that they just do not want anything to do with assets under management or having the conflict of interest to help, grow the investment accounts so that their fees go up, and they're just philosophically dead set against managing investments. And I think ultimately we can make arguments all day long, till we're blue in the face against that. But if that's what they believe, that's what they believe. I think ultimately, though, a lot of folks end up doing this out of they just want to focus on the planning. They're not sure what else to do. And so they just kind of leave it. So it's almost, apathy, I guess, or, just kind of sitting there waiting to try to figure out what the best option is. So, the direction that you take is ultimately going to come back to who's your ideal client, as you are probably so sick of hearing Michael and I say.
And what service model do you want to bring to the table for them?
Like, what service model are they looking for? What do they need from you? You may find that your target market has all of their money in 401ks, and the only thing you need to do is just make some basic recommendations on 401k assets. And you want to do that inside your monthly planning fee, totally fine. But you may, as those clients grow and as they change jobs and things like that, suddenly you're going to have these 401k rollovers that you're thinking, what do I do with them? And, for a lot of folks, you may just send them to Vanguard. There are some issues with advisement. I know it seems like the simplest option of all of everything, but I would caution advisors to not think of it as just pure simple. And the reason is because it can be really challenging on two fronts. One, getting the client to actually do what you recommend is really challenging.
Right. If they were so good at just getting some advice from someone and doing what the person told them to do, we probably wouldn't have a lot of their clients, right? Like, hey, you really need to go to Vanguard and put 60% in the total market and 40% in BND. You're probably not the only person on the planet that was going to tell them to do that, right? Like, they may have heard it somewhere else or some similar advice, yet often clients don't, right? That they've got behavioral challenges around their financial decision-making process. That's one of the reasons why they end up hiring an advisor, right? Like, it's not just tell me what to do. Like, we're not in an information dispensing business anymore. It's help me do it. And when you get down to the help me do it part, there's some challenges with just sending people off with marching orders that says, well, I told you to buy a diversified portfolio.
Just the same way we say, you need to go get that life insurance policy, and whether or not they ever actually get that life insurance policy is a different story. This is just one of the challenges that I think advisors face. The other challenge is getting information. Assuming your client has actually done what they said they were going to do, then getting information back in terms of view of the accounts, being sure that clients rebalance when they're supposed to, just kind of having the information then funneling into your financial planning software is challenging. And yes, technology is getting better with account aggregation. We are slowly developing better ways to be able to view access into accounts that we're not actively managing. But accounts that are sitting at a custodian that you are managing are 100 times easier to get access to right now, just from a pure data standpoint, which is something that really frustrated me at times when I would have clients just open up Vanguard accounts. I couldn't figure out what was going on in those accounts. And so then it just ends up being a very, very time consuming process.
Well, and now it's even more awkward because if you send someone to Vanguard to do that while you're otherwise advising them, but you're not attached to the account, your client's probably going to get a letter from Vanguard saying, have you checked out our Vanguard Personal Advisor Services platform? And just recognize, like, if you if you send your client off to somewhere else to get advisement, or you're doing the advisement, you're sending them off somewhere else for the implementation, be careful who you send them to, because you may be sending them to competition. And, I know we'd all like to think ultimately, well, our service is so awesome and great that no one's going to be dissuaded away from us. But I think it's a real world issue you've got to consider. Are you systematically sending your clients off to a competitor? Certainly there are ways to refer out to other providers that aren't sending the clients off to competitors, but you have to kind of due diligence who you're sending them to and what the nature of the relationship is. And is there a commitment from the firm on the other end, or the advisor or the investment manager, whoever it is, not to solicit your clients for the part you do, the financial planning, while you send them off there to get the investment management? And with a lot of large investment firms increasingly coming into the financial planning world, that is a much messier sort of refer out line than it used to be. Like, ironic, it's easier if I send it to the attorney that does wills and trusts. I know the attorney is not coming into my business, right? Like, they're very distinct business lines. But as investment management and financial planning blurs, those dividing lines blur, it's not just you want to be a financial planner and send out the investment management. It's that there are investment managers who want to bring the financial planning in-house and would be happy to bring your clients along with it.
Absolutely. So these are kind of the three, I would say, primary options. And we could get in and parse these out and just beat the dead horse if we wanted to. But these are the three options. You're either going to do it all yourself in terms of investment management. You're going to outsource part or most or all of the actual investment management work, depending on the TAMP that you hire, or you're just not going to do it at all. And you're going to have the client basically do it and stay responsible for it, or outsource to another, or have them go hire a different provider that's completely separate from you. So when we look at can we charge for investment management, and then we'll talk about how much should we actually charge. So first, should we even be charging for investment management if we're getting paid to do financial planning? Now, I would say very obviously, if you are in that advisement mode and you're just sending everything to Vanguard or someone else, no, you're not going to be getting paid to do that. That service is probably wrapped into your financial planning fee. But if you are bringing it in-house and you're going to do this in some way, whether you're doing it all yourself or you're outsourcing, should you charge for investment management? Michael, what do you think? Can you charge for this if you're already charging for planning?
Yeah, to me, you can absolutely charge for both, because there are different services. Like, that's the whole point, is they're different services that you're delivering. So, I think I even mentioned this on a prior episode, but like, let's say just for extremes, you run a dual service, you offer yoga and investment management. Is it awkward that they pay for yoga lessons and then you also charge them for investment management? No, because you pay for your yoga classes, you pay for your investment management. Like, these are separate services. Even if I happen to do them under one roof, these are separate, distinct services. So the idea that you're going to do financial planning and then also do investment management and charge clients a financial planning fee for the planning and an investment management fee for the investment management, is that inappropriate or bad or double dipping? No, not at all. Now, in a world where many AUM firms bundle these together, if you're charging the exact same AUM fee that a comprehensive AUM firm charges for doing AUM plus financial planning, and then you charge a financial planning fee on the side, now it's getting a little bit weird, right? So if
I would say weird, I would say that you're charging a certain amount of money, right? It's not right or wrong in the way that you're charging, but you may be charging more than your competition, which we'll dig into that, because I think that's a really good point, especially for smaller clients. But yeah, I totally agree that if you're providing financial planning, you're providing investment management, those are separate services. I think the only folks that argue with this are the vast majority of investment advisors who have come from a world where we always bundled it together, and we've called this financial planning. And yet what we were talking about a bunch of different services under one roof. And what we're starting to see are newer firms and some existing firms making the transition where they're parsing this out and they're saying, hey, I want to provide financial planning on a monthly subscription basis so that I can work with clients no matter what their assets are. And then if they need me to manage their investments, I will also provide that as kind of an a la carte upsell service that is a separate and distinct service. Whereas historically, we have always provided, that investment management piece was basically required. It was core to our service model. And then the financial planning kind of drove folks in. So I would invite listeners to really think about this in the sense of, we're trying to basically redesign the model. We're not coming from okay, how do we make some small tweaks? We're basically, to the existing way that this is done. We're looking at this and we're saying, what's the best way today, given what services that we have, what technology is out there, what information consumers have, what they're looking for in terms of financial planning services. And I think we're both in agreement that doing financial planning is a separate, distinct service from doing investment management. I will throw out a caveat, and I know this will probably get me some hate mail. I would recommend for financial planners that are out there that are looking to do this, do not take on investment-only clients. That is just my blanket recommendation. If you are a core financial planner at heart and you want to be doing comprehensive financial planning, I made this mistake myself where a client comes in with $500,000. They say, would you just manage my investments? I don't want financial planning. And it was completely outside the scope of my core service offering. And I did it. And I always regretted it because you know what they always do? They always leave looking for someone else.
Yeah, well, because they're shopping for returns. I mean, there's
absolutely.
Just part of that is just there's the mentality of who are you? There's the mentality of who does that, like what kind of client does that. But I mean, I couldn't agree more. And it's certainly in the context of our discussion here, like you're making a financial planning firm. You may or may not layer on an investment management service because it's a convenience and a support and an implementation follow through item for some of your clients that you can still do in a properly aligned basis that minimizes your conflicts of interest. So we can do it on a fee only basis, and that's fine. But you're not an investment management firm, first and foremost. You're not in the business of selling investment management. You're trying to be a financial planner. And what happens if you take investment-only clients as a financial planning firm? You're going to spend a lot of time, distraction, heartache, stress, dealing with someone who has a very low likelihood of sticking around for any period of time and is just a distraction for the business. You couldn't agree more.
So we're both in agreement here that we're saying charge for investment management. Now, a question that I get quite a bit, and again, before we actually talk about how much we think you should be charging, is if I hire a TAMP, if I hire an outsourced provider and I'm outsourcing pretty much all of the work, and this could be a Betterment Institutional where literally you do nothing except set the asset allocation. You say 60-40, and that is the only thing you ever touch, all the way up to some of the other TAMP providers where maybe you have more of a hands-on delivery of the performance reports and things like that. If those TAMPs are charging 25, 50, 75 basis points, whatever that number is, can you as the financial planner charge a fee on top of that? Or should you simply say, hey, you know what, Betterment Institutional charges 25 basis points, so clients are just going to pay that and I don't get paid extra to be the investment advisor? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I hear this all the time, and I kind of giggle about it. It's like, the fact that we're having this discussion means the client doesn't already have all their money at Betterment. So, is it appropriate? I hear these things like, why would I charge them when they could go directly to Betterment? But they're not already at Betterment, and they haven't already done it, and they haven't made the transition, and they couldn't get off their backside to do it on their own. Like, this is why they're paying you to help them get stuff like this done. Like, the reality. Almost any TAMP that's out there, almost any investment manager that's out there, like, you do realize a client at any time could just open their own account on Schwab or Fidelity or TD Ameritrade, all of which have retail divisions, and buy the same stuff you put in your portfolio. Like, it's not secret sauce. The what you're ultimately getting paid for is the ongoing support and management, the ongoing monitoring, the fact that you can also fire this investment manager if they're doing a poor job, and the fact that you are watching that ship even when the client is not, as well as still the level of servicing and client interaction that goes on. Because if you call up Betterment or a TAMP or any of these other platforms because the client's freaking out with the problem, there ain't no financial planner there to answer that call, to help them out. Hey, I got fired and my life is changing. What the hell should I do with my investment portfolio? That call comes to you. That's a high value call in a high stress situation where you got to help them figure out what to do. That's part of the value, even if you don't necessarily have a lot of stuff to do on an ongoing basis. I mean, this sort of reminds me of, like, why would I pay a doctor for an x-ray? Because the x-ray machine just takes the picture. Like, the doctor still kind of has a role in this, like making sure the equipment is used properly and interpreting the results and applying them in your situation. And granted, it's maybe not the best analogy. I need a better one, but like that kind of context here as well. Like, even third-party asset management platforms, like, they're tools a financial planner uses to help a client implement you will pay something to the tool, the provider for doing that, and you will pay something for the planner for their role in the process in applying the tool properly.
Now, one of the things I want to point out, and you said this very early on, and that is that when people ask you this question, you giggle. And in the years I have known you, I don't think I've ever heard you actually giggle. So I would
sometimes it's more of like an internal smirk with a little bit. It's an internal giggle. Externally, it just looks more like a smirking, snarky look.
I need a listener to ask Michael this question while I'm saying that, because I want to hear the giggle. No, and I totally agree. I actually do laugh out loud sometimes because I think it is such a highlight of where we've come from a profession and how all we had to sell was complexity of investments and that we could open accounts and rebalance better than anybody. And that's not our value anymore. So I have a couple of analogies, I guess, that may help someone that's in the position of trying to decide if you should charge. So one, to your point, clients will say, well, why should I use Betterment Institutional when they could just go get Betterment Retail for the same price? And the answer is the same reason you use TD Ameritrade if you're custodying assets, and they could go just open a retail account, right? That option has always been there, and yet clients never utilize it. The other thing...
Well, I actually, just a quick note, there are clients that utilize that. They're called do-it-yourselfers, and they don't show up in your office asking for financial planning help.
Very true.
That's I find that's kind of the biggest fundamental difference for just this whole thing that I think too many of us forget. Overgeneralizing a little, we can basically break the world into two groups of people: those who want to do it themselves and those who want someone else to do it for them. The people who want to do it themselves don't come into your office for financial planning advice.
Will not be clients.
They don't even show up because they do it themselves. The people who show up in your office, by and large, are people who want someone else to help them do it, either to at least to validate the decision that they're making, if not to just completely do it for them. So recognize, there's kind of this, this group that self-selects themselves and who comes in your office. They are generally not hardcore do-it-yourselfers because they wouldn't be in your office if they were. They're people who are looking for you to help, to validate a decision, to actually become the one that they delegate to. Now, they ask you a zillion questions and drill you hard, as they should, because they're not sure who to trust. Our industry has terribly low trust for good reason, because there's a lot of bad people that do a lot of bad things. So it takes a lot of time to build that trust and demonstrate that value. But just recognize, people pay for service, right? We pay for service across a whole lot of things. There is a service provider element to this that people are willing to pay for. Now, they might not pay you the same thing that they would pay if you did the whole thing internally, right? You got to recognize there's some things you're not doing because you're working with a TAMP, which is going to feed into the pricing conversation in a moment. But there is a layer of value you are providing that they want, or they wouldn't have come to you, they would have done it themselves, that it's okay to charge them for, to get paid for the value that you're providing.
So 2 quick points on that. One is going back to this, can I really charge on top of a TAMP? And remember earlier, whenever we likened, hiring a TAMP as if you were hiring an investment advisor in your office to provide all the investment related services. Now imagine that person's salary is $100,000. I've never had an advisor tell me, well, I only pay my investment guy $100,000, so I can probably only charge my clients a total of $100,000 to cover their salary, and then I can never charge anything on top of that because I've now paid for the investment services, which is silly to even think about. And yet we'll say, okay, well, I'm just going to let the client pay the TAMP fee. They're not going to pay me anything. It's just like hiring someone and basically just passing through their salary, which you would never do. But I think the final piece is in terms of what value are we providing? If your value is truly you open accounts better than anybody and you rebalance great and you've got awesome model portfolios, yeah, that's a tough piece to sell. But ultimately, what are we as investment managers? We don't manage investments. We manage behavior. And that's probably a complete rip from Carl Richards from his presentation that he gave recently. So I'll give him a shout out for that. We manage behavior. That's what we do as investment advisors. We don't manage individual investments anymore. It's just not where our industry is headed. And so the behavioral side is the part that the TAMP cannot help with, and that you as the financial planner are helping with. And as those investment accounts grow, it becomes a bigger deal whenever the client calls you freaking out about what's happening overseas or some, terrorist attack or a, tsunami happens, whatever it is, and they call you freaking out. You're the one that gets to talk them off the ledge. You're the one that gets to go back and say, hey, you remember what we decided, what we discussed were your financial goals? Are those still really what's important to you? Is that what we're really focused on? How does this affect that? You're the one that does that. And it's okay to charge for that service because honestly, that's a really valuable service anyway. And we're going to see technology and more TAMPs coming onto the scene that drive down the cost of TAMPs because ultimately that is a commodity.
Yes.
Account opening, rebalancing, trading, all of that is a commodity. But what you're doing as the investment advisor is most certainly not a commodity.
And frankly, that's why a lot of these platforms are increasingly hiring their own internal financial planners and coming into this space, right? Like they're tired of being the low value commoditized layer underneath financial planners that are the higher value and frankly higher margin from a business perspective.
So moving on to kind of our final piece, which is how much should I actually charge for this investment service? And I think we can break down the how to charge in two ways. One would be that it is somehow you price investment management into your monthly retainer fee. So we see this with some different calculations. If you listen to episode 20 with Andrew Severston, I can never say his last name correctly. Severtson. Thank you. Sorry, Andrew. And if you listen to Andrew, they have this, and you can go back xyplannetwork.com/20 to listen to their the way that they calculate it. It's basically a net worth fee. And that kind of wraps in this investment management component into a planning fee that then gets billed monthly or quarterly at that firm. Or you're charging a separate and distinct AUM fee. So I think those are kind of the two ways. It's either somehow included. Some folks are very flat fee and they say, I'm going to charge $200 a month on top of my monthly retainer just for investment management. I don't care if it's $50,000 or $5 million. I'm just going to go totally flat. It can be some sort of net worth calculation that's encompassing the growing investment accounts, but not necessarily a direct one-to-one relationship. Or there's going to be this complete AUM component where we say, X% of AUM. And there's no right way to do this. It comes down to your ideal client profile. Who are you working with? I would say the majority of folks are in that, percentage of AUM. I'm not sure that that's necessarily because that's the best way. I think it's probably just because that's where our industry has come from and we're slowly shifting away. But for now, charging a monthly subscription fee for financial planning, whatever that fee is, and then charging a separate AUM percentage is probably the most typical. And so the question is then how do we charge for it? One, how much do we charge?
What do they charge, right?
Right.
What's the price?
What's the percentage? And then also the key here is whatever we talk about is that there are very, very rarely, if ever, account minimums. Because account minimums came from needing to make a certain amount of money per client in order to be profitable. Well, the cool thing for you as the advisor that's charging a monthly subscription fee for financial planning is you are already profitable working with this client, whether you're managing their investments or not. This is an add-on service. So you don't have to worry about if they, you don't have to have $1 million minimums. You can work with someone with a $5,000 Roth IRA getting $250 a month because you're already making money off this relationship on the planning side. So that being said, no minimums. Where do we go with the percentages? So, we see a lot of different things. Do you philosophically have an opinion on where people should be starting the conversation with AUM?
Yeah, I guess philosophically, although I'll acknowledge, I wear two hats. I'm a co-founder for XYPN Network, but I'm also a partner in an independent RIA that does this. Now, we do this in a world where our typical client does have north of $1 million, so our AUM fee schedule, comes in right around this 1% level. And so my initial gut response to this kind of right out of the bat is, well, I think you'd be charging something less than 1%, just in that kind of industry rule of thumb number that the typical advisor charges 1%. And in truth, it's a wider range than that. And it's actually a little bit lower than that when you look at larger RIAs and what they average across all their assets. But my gut response comes back to say something lower than 1, just recognizing that of the classic 1% AUM fee, a bunch of that is basically the advisor's time and effort making the portfolios or the staff and overhead of all the people they've hired to build and manage portfolios. And that's a thing that Well, I guess if you're doing the TAMP, you're outsourcing. So we should make a difference here. Like, what would I charge is different if it's a TAMP than versus if I'm doing the custodian thing. I'd be a little bit higher on the custodian side because I'm doing more of the work. So I want to charge a little bit more. If I'm bringing a TAMP in the picture, A, I'm doing less of the work. B, the TAMP is charging something. So what's that presumably going to be? Yes, so I'm going to presumably dial myself down a little bit. But just in a world where so many firms do 1% for AUM plus financial planning, I'm kind of still, my gut is if your planning is separate and your AUM fee is just an investment only implementation fee overlay, I don't know. I mean, I think I start coming into somewhere in the neighborhood of, I don't know, 0.7 to 0.9. And then if you're using a TAMP, that you might even carve a portion of your TAMP fee out of that. So maybe you're at a 0.5 to a 0.7.
So I would say you're awfully low. And here's why. I think that you're saying 1%. Most RIAs charge 1% AUM, and now we're going to come in and charge 1% AUM. But depending on the investment platform and how all this shakes out, 1% does not really mean 1%. If you go into a traditional financial planning firm that's working with, million and up clients, they're charging their 1% AUM fee, but then they're also using, the DFA recently, I got an email from them saying, industry average was 1.2% mutual fund expense ratio. So there's another 1.2% on average that's coming out of clients' accounts. Plus you add in trading cost. And, whether that's an asset-based fee or it's per trade, you start layering these fees and suddenly 1% isn't 1% anymore. 1% starts looking sneakily like 2%. Whereas if you're doing the investment management, you outsource to a Betterment Institutional platform, which we had Steve, Lokshin on from Betterment Institutional, back in episode 16. So xyplanetwork.com/16. He talks about this, but they charge 25 basis points, and that includes all the trading costs. It includes, they're using all Vanguard ETFs.
Betterment
Institutional is charging their 25 bips. It includes all the trading costs are wrapped into that. They're using all Vanguard ETFs. So internal expense ratios are probably 7 basis points. So if the advisor's charging 1%, the clients are only actually paying,
1.3 all.
Exactly. And so I would say that especially because there are no investment minimums, because let's be honest, there's no competition in this space. There are very few other financial planners that are out there willing to provide a similar service. I think you can start at 1%. I'm not sure I would go higher than that, but I think you can start at 1% and then tier down from there.
Well, and you have a good point as well that even while we talk about this, rule of thumb that advisors charge 1% AUM fees, most of them do that with graduated rate schedules where, it averages out to 1-ish, somewhere around $1 million, give or take a little. But most of them, if you started from $1, their AUM fee schedules are higher. They're 1.2, 1.4. I still know some fairly large firms out there whose fee schedules actually start at 2%.
Yep.
Now, it's 2% on the first 50 grand or 100 grand, and they do it in part because they're basically politely saying go away, but if you really want to be here, I guess we'll do it for 2%. But it's a good point that the average account size, the average household we're probably talking about for serving by definition a group that is not already being served by the AUM model, which means they tend to have much smaller account balances because they're primarily financial planning centric. But what does it mean to do that $80,000 rollover? Yeah, you have a good point. That $80,000 rollover, whether it's going to end out in advisor accounts with higher AUM fees plus potentially higher expense ratio items, whether they're going to end up being sold a wrap account and mutual funds or A-share mutual funds or C-share mutual funds even that can quickly clear 2% expense ratios. You have a good point. When you're charging 1% on an $80,000 account, even if it's 1% plus some, tamper platform fees, you're arguably actually still a lot cheaper than a lot of other alternatives out there for an $80,000 investment account.
Absolutely. So
because you're doing it as an add-on, you're doing it as a supplement to an already profitable service. You're not trying to take the entire profit margin out of someone that's got an $80,000 account while you don't provide them any other value.
So this is really in context of, okay, we're going to do all the investment management, and so we're going to charge 1% and then tier down from there, in addition to our monthly retainer fee. Now, as we've kind of been dancing around, there's this added complexity when you have a TAMP. And this question comes up all the time. Do I charge 1% and pay my TAMP fee out of that? Or do I charge a direct fee to the client and then they pay a TAMP fee, directly to the TAMP? And part of it is actually the TAMP that you work with and how they deduct fees. So, back to Betterment Institutional, that fee, their 25 basis points literally comes out of the client account. There is no option for you to charge 1% and Betterment keeps 25 of it. Clients are going to know that they're paying 25 basis points to Betterment Institutional. But, Steve on his episode recommended, he says, I think that you should charge your fee of 1%. And the client should pay the platform fee because it includes all the trading costs. It's the custodial platform. It's all these other pieces. It's all the trading and everything.
At least because Steve is tied to Betterment Institutional and they do cover the trading fees in their platform costs, right? Like that's not
whereas other TAMPs
universally true for all
absolutely.
TAMPs, right?
So there are other TAMPs. And so I will say, I don't think there's a right answer as to if you pass the TAMP cost directly on the client or you eat it yourself. I suspect that if you're using a TAMP, you're probably not going to be making any more than 50 to 75 basis points net would be my guess as the investment advisor, because again, you are outsourcing a ton of the work. You're not doing everything. So, this is the same as if you hire someone in-house, you got to pay them, right? And so that salary is going to be coming off your books. This is basically you paying an investment person. It's really nice that it starts at zero and grows with assets. And yes, there will come a day where you realize you're paying them way more money than you would be paying an in-house person. Mm-hmm. But I think whether or not you pass it through, one is kind of dependent on the TAMP, and two, I think it really depends on how you sell it and just what's going to be appropriate for you and your investment philosophy and how you're working with that TAMP with your clients. So I don't know if you have a better answer than it just kind of depends, but those are the two ways that we see people doing it.
No, I mean, I think it's true. I hate to sort of come back to this because I feel like it's a little bit of a cop-out, but what your clients will pay is whatever the market will bear, right? And frankly, in a world where there are providers out there charging clients with all-in costs that are well north of 2%, arguably it's kind of comical when we quibble about oh man, should I charge 0.6 or 0.7 or 0.8 on top of the 25 bip Betterment institutional fee? So it's gee, do I need to be 70% cheaper than everybody else to be successful? Or can I get away with only being 60% cheaper than everybody else? If that's your anxiety point, you're probably either misunderstanding your own value proposition for clients, or you really need to bolster your value proposition for clients, or just there's some disconnect there. Because certainly if your greatest fear is, do I need to be 60 or 70% cheaper than a bunch of others serving small clients in order to be successful, you've got an overall pricing problem. So yeah, I mean, I think there is a piece of this of kind of it's what the market will bear. And I will admit that for a huge number of advisors that I see that really struggle with where to set this pricing, with kind of all due respect to anyone I may unwittingly take a dig at here, the problem is not to what to charge clients. The problem is that they lack confidence in their own value. And so they're terrified to actually charge clients even a, going market rate or a only 50% less than going market rate, because they just don't trust their own value proposition about what they're bringing to the table, and that's really the blocking point. It's not like they've been pitching this at 1% and 87% of people have said no, so they're going, crap, I need to change my pricing structure. Most of the ones that I've talked to that are terrified of charging, even the 1% that you're advocating, or maybe a 0.7 that I'm advocating, they've never pitched it to a client, even been denied, right? It's not that everyone's saying no and they're questioning their pricing. It's that they're too afraid to ask someone for the business, and they're using, pricing or pricing fears as an excuse. So at a minimum, if that's where you're hung up, if you're listening to this and that's where you're hung up, all right, my first advice to you, pick some reasonable price point. You can start with Alan's. Pick Alan's price point. After you've delivered this to 20 prospective clients, if more than 15 of them have said no, you can consider whether you're mispriced. Because recognize not everyone's going to buy your stuff. If everybody says yes, you're actually horribly mispriced by being too low.
And working with way too many people.
So, ideally, all right, if 75% are saying no, you probably have a problem. If more than 75% are saying yes, you also have a problem. You're charging too little. So you should probably be somewhere in between those bookends. This may be even a whole other episode. How, pricing, setting your pricing, how often should people say no? But just recognize that until you've brought this out to 20 prospects and found the overwhelming majority of them are saying no, you shouldn't be worrying about your price. And frankly, if you do that and 20 and more than 15 out of 20 say no, my next question to you is going to be, how are you explaining your services?
Exactly.
What is your marketing process? What is your sales process? Go back, work on that more, improve the way that you explain your value and what you do, refine it, listen to the negatives you're getting, take it to 20 more. And if on the second 20, you still can't close 5 out of 20, then I will acknowledge maybe you have a price point problem. And I'm going to bet for virtually everybody listening here, if you pitch this to 20 people who are otherwise coming to you seeking out your services because they got referred to you, you did your marketing, whatever, and then you use the first 20 to refine your process about how you explain your investment value proposition for the second 20, you are all going to find that more than 25% of the people say yes. You're not going to close everyone if you're imagining you can. You're not going to, and B, you shouldn't. If you do, it means you're undercharging. So like, do that part of the process first. And I know it sucks getting rejected and pitching things and saying no, but like, if you're not getting the no's, you shouldn't be having this fear conversation about whether you're priced wrong.
I couldn't agree more. And I don't know. I just don't see prospective clients saying, oh, I'm sorry, you charge 1%. There's another guy down the road that charges 95 basis points. I think I'd rather go with them. That's just not the conversation. I mean, if you're thinking about charging 2.5%, then yeah, you're going to run into a pricing issue. Clients are not all that price sensitive. I just don't find that the vast majority of clients are that price sensitive. They will pay a little bit more. They'll pay a lot more if they see the value in what they're buying. And if you're that concerned about price, then my concern would be if we're arguing about 1% versus 90 basis points versus 80 basis points, then in your sales process, you are probably really focused on the price and you're competing on price instead of competing on value. And that may be, and future episode, I'd like to have a sales coach on for a program that I actually went through. And just, so whether it's that program or another one, just learning how to sell the value of what you do. And Michael, to your point, the only way to learn how to sell is to sell and to be rejected and to refine and to think what went right, what went wrong. You said something really stupid in the meeting and didn't know how to answer a question. Fine. Come back to it, learn, practice. Yeah. Because by the time you're done with 40 prospective client meetings, you're going to be pretty darn good at explaining what you do. Because the first time, man, I remember the first time I tried to explain XY Planning Network to somebody on the phone, I was bumbling over myself and I couldn't figure out how to say it. Was all in my head and I was so excited about it. I just couldn't get it out. Now that conversation is really easy. It's really smooth because I've done it literally hundreds and hundreds of times. And I think that anybody listening to this will also experience that. So, well, Michael, thanks again for co-hosting this episode. This one was fun. This is a good topic.
I think I got promoted there.
Did you get promoted to co-host?
Yeah, because you kicked this show off with like you were hosting and you were here with the guest Michael. Because I was going to ask, like, at the point that I've managed to work in, I was going to say 2 in a row, but like, is it 3 in a row? Because we did the mailbag.
We did the mailbag recently. This is 3 episodes in a row.
So 3 in a row. I have been promoted. This is awesome.
So Michael's going to be demoted. He doesn't get to come back on until the end of the month for the next mailbag episode because we will have some interviews coming up. So
I'm getting kicked off. Someday maybe we'll figure out how to do a 3-way call, 3-way podcast. The technology, I'm told, isn't quite there yet, but
it's more getting you and me scheduled along with a very busy guest at the same time. So 2 a.m. is pretty much the only available time on our slots because I will tell folks that right now it is 11 p.m. at night where Michael is sitting. So
yes, I am recording the late night podcast.
Very true. So, all right, man. Well, thanks so much for being on.
Absolutely. Thank you. Enjoy, everyone.
I hope this episode was able to answer your questions about providing investment management services to clients that you're also charging a monthly subscription fee for financial planning too. I know there are a lot of questions around the right way to provide this service. I think ultimately it comes down to the type of work you want to be doing for your clients and what services they're looking for from their financial planner. Remember that you can find the show notes along with any resources mentioned in this episode at xyplannetwork.com/24. Now, this month's episodes are brought to you by Financial Planners Assistance, providing compliance services to financial planners and other investment advisors since 1982. Financial Planners Assistance is a boutique consulting firm that provides the personalized compliance services firms are looking for. Now, I've actually personally worked with Financial Planners Assistance since launching my firm, Serenity Financial Consulting, back in 2012. And I honestly can't say enough about the awesome service and support that I've received, including going through an audit by the state of Wisconsin. Now, you can check them out at www.financialplannersassistance.com, and you can also look for our upcoming interview with their president and senior compliance consultant, Jim Cullen. Thanks again for joining us today. We'll see you next time.
You're not alone, and you're not crazy. It's scary starting, building, and growing your own financial planning firm. And that's why we put together a free private community just for you, the Cutting Edge Financial Planner. Go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP or text XYPN Radio to 33344 and join a network of thousands ready to change the lives of Gen X and Gen Y clients.